Executive Director, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Tania. Very happy to be here.
Well, UNICEF has issued a child global alert calling the world a virtual tinderbox for catastrophic levels of severe malnutrition in children. Can you tell me how worried you are, and how has the pandemic, the climate crisis, and of course the war in Ukraine impacted your findings?
The short answer is I'm very, very worried. Before all of the things that you described, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, we were still already facing a situation where 1 in 5 children who died was dying of severe acute malnutrition in the world. So it's a staggering number. It's about 100 million children who die from this, and it's really just a devastating way to die. These poor children, I mean, we call it wasting. They literally waste away. And it's a devastating thing to see. And we know now it's only going to be exacerbated by these other problems, by continuing climate problems, by conflict, which makes it much more difficult for children and to get food to children. And so the combination of these challenges is a very serious problem for children around the world.
UNICEF is the largest global provider of life-saving food treatment for acute malnutrition, with its cost set to rise by 16%. What does that mean for children at the end of the supply chain?
We already are facing a world where children are dying because they don't have enough to eat, right? As the prices go up, that is just going to make the problem worse. And so for UNICEF, we're very much focused on our donors who have been incredibly generous to us in the past and saying, we need the resources here. We know how to address this problem. We have something called RUTF, which is this ready-to-use therapeutic food, it's like a little bag of peanuts and sugar and milk products, and together it provides the nutrients these children need to survive. And so we can fix the problem. We just need the resources to do it.
What would you like global leaders, governments, the private sector to do to step up to help?
First, I would like government leaders and everyone to know that the problems that children face, the horrible challenges that they face, are never, ever created by children, right? They're innocent victims in all of this. And governments need to do better. We all need to do better by children. Children are the future for all of us. And if we don't take care of them, the prospects for everyone are very dire. So I think that's my first message is please think about children when you're involved in things like conflict, when you're thinking about remediating problems related to climate. Think about the impacts on children. And I think second, I would say, again, we know how to address this problem. We just need the resources to do it. And so we need the resources from governments, from other donors to help us take care of these children so that they don't waste away.
You were recently on the ground on the Horn of Africa. What did you witness and how did that affect you?
I actually saw it in both the Horn of Africa and in Afghanistan, where I visited children who we are taking care of with this RUTF. So the children come in, they get measured to see whether they qualify, whether they are actually severely and acutely malnourished. And if they are, we start giving them this therapeutic food. It's devastating to see this. You walk into a hospital ward, and there are many, in Afghanistan, there were 2 children in a bed. The mothers are kind of hovering around, and the whole room is quiet. And I said to the doctors, why? Why is it quiet like that? I've never been around a bunch of babies who are so quiet. And he said, well, first, it's painful to be in this situation with this severe and acute malnutrition. And they also are so weak that they don't even have the energy to cry. And so to see that, it's hard to put the images out of your mind. And it's hard to think about what these mothers are going through when they know that they can't take care of their children, that they can't feed these babies in a way that will help them to survive. So it's a heartbreaking thing to see. And I try hard to put it out of my mind, but I also know that we can do better and we can help them. And that's the mission that we all have to undertake here.
Catherine, when you witness scenes like you describe, what does it make you want to do and to wake governments up, leaders up, countries up to say, we can't just have children waste away like this?
Yeah. Tania, it is devastating to see it. It really is. These children they're so tiny. They're literally skin and bones in some cases. And to see that, I mean, I've had my own children. The thought of being a mother and knowing that you are not able to give your child what your child needs to survive is a devastating, devastating thing to see. It makes me profoundly sad, but it also makes me unhappy, that we're not doing better. And I know we can do better. UNICEF knows how to address this problem. This, for us, at least for the most severely and acutely malnourished children, is a resource question. We need more resources. And if we have the resources, we can help these children. We know that. This formula that we give them helps them survive. It's over 90% of children who get this formula will survive. But we need the resources to get it, and governments need to do everything they can. Donors, everyone needs to step up and say, we cannot live in a world where children are dying of things that they don't have to die from. Enough children die from all sorts of terrible things in the world. They don't need to die from this.
Well, you also talked about Afghanistan, where currently 1.1 million children are expected to suffer from severe malnutrition. Of course, there's been the withdrawal of the US troops and the allies, and under Taliban rule, what are your UNICEF teams seeing on the ground? And do you blame the US for the situation now?
I did go to Afghanistan, and I was there initially actually to talk about girls' education and the importance of girls being in school. But when I started to visit some of these families and to understand how dramatic the food insecurity situation is there, I realized that the international community really needs to step up and do better by these families and these children. I visited one family where the mother had 5 children. She told me that they are essentially subsisting on water and bread unless her husband, who is a day worker, can get some work, and then they can buy some potatoes. So the situation there is devastating, and it could get much worse because they had a drought last year, and now they are dependent on wheat and other sunflower oil from Ukraine. That's obviously going up. The prices are going up. So this combination of challenges is making it very difficult there. And I think that as an international community, we need to stand up and say, whatever has happened in Afghanistan, we need to take care of the children there. We need to make sure that they have the resources they need to survive. And I think that's an issue that everybody in the international community has to be a part of.
But surely more could have been done prior to the withdrawal to prevent this.
It's hard for me to answer that question, honestly. I think that, as I said, Afghanistan had a drought last year, and now the challenge is they've got to just get more money into the system there. I know people are working on that, but that country has faced so much challenge for decades. What we see over and over again is that the people who suffer from these are the most vulnerable people. It's the women, it's the children. And that's what, as a community, we need to stand up and say, regardless of how we got here, we need to do better by these people. We need to make sure that these children are surviving. And I think, as I said, we know how to do it. We just have to have the will to do it.
And talking about the conflict in Ukraine, Catherine, you've said every day is a nightmare for millions of children as they face the horrors of war. How desperate is the situation, and what kind of reports, again, are you getting from your teams there on the ground?
Yeah, I did visit Romania on the border of Ukraine just to see what was happening there. And what I see is what you see on the news, which is women and children coming across the border, so sort of shell-shocked by what's happening. They've left behind their fathers, their partners. They want to go home. They want to go home in the worst possible way, but they can't for now. And so, again, this man-made conflict, which was totally unnecessary, has created havoc for these families. We've seen, 5 million people leave the country. Another 7 million people are internally displaced. Half of those are children. Right? And so what does it mean for them? It means a lot of bad things, right? What we're seeing is unaccompanied children who are very vulnerable to things like trafficking. And so we are very much on the lookout. I've talked to Interpol, others, trying to make sure that everybody's on the lookout for these children who are vulnerable and who could get into very bad situations. And then again, these children are not, they're not in school, they're not in their communities, and the surrounding communities of Ukraine have been incredibly generous and helpful, reaching out to people, trying to help the children and the women who are coming across. But it's not the same as being at home, right? It's just not. And so we are working hard. Our people there are doing their best, and our people are also in Ukraine, trying to help in the areas where they can, trying to get health supplies, sanitation supplies, water to people who are still living in the country and who also desperately need help.
How shocked are you and how distressed are you when you hear the reports of schools being attacked, children dying there? What is your message to those who are responsible?
My message is that children and all the places that they visit, schools, hospitals, have to be off limits. They have to be off limits. Conflict is conflict, and I don't pretend that UNICEF is going to solve every conflict in the world, but I really call on all parties to make sure that children are not hurt unnecessarily in this process. We know already at least 250 children have been killed, 330 more injured, and those are the bare minimum numbers. We know it's much worse than that. That is not acceptable. It's just not acceptable as a world. We can do better. Everyone can do better if they make an effort to protect the most innocent people in our communities.
Catherine, as someone who's served in government as assistant to the US President and a former US Ambassador at Large for global women's issues, what do you want the leaders to do to prevent this? Where do you see this going?
Look, at the end of the day, children need peace. They just need peace. Any situation where you have conflict, where you have a climate crisis, where you have these major challenges, children and the others, women who are the most vulnerable, are always the ones who are going to suffer the most. And so I call on everyone to stop this conflict, to have peace, so that children have some opportunity of a decent future.
Are you shocked by the brutality that you've seen, especially against children?
You know, I unfortunately have seen in my career a lot of conflicts, and I have seen terrible, brutal things happen to children. And no matter how many times I see it, I'm always shocked. And I know that we can do better. I know that we can do better. And these children deserve it. And I hope with every shred of my being that we can do better and protect these children going forward.
And with so many global crises needing funding around the world, we've talked about the pandemic, we've talked about the situation in Ukraine, and of course, the climate crisis. Are you worried that yours will not be a priority?
You know, I am worried. I've seen already that some countries are thinking about cutting back on some of the development aid that they do. That is such a short-sighted mistake. And I really plead with all countries to make sure that they continue to support the humanitarian work that we're doing, the development work that we're doing, because ultimately, yes, I understand that this is a dramatic problem. It's a conflict in the heart of Europe, but we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect children in this process, to protect women, and to make sure that these communities are developed in a way that we hopefully can prevent more conflict in the future, that we can prevent some of this conflict that we know is devastating communities and children and families around the world.
You became UNICEF's 8th Executive Director on the 1st of February 2022. What is your vision going forward?
You know, my vision is a world where we are coming together as a world to support and protect and cherish and nurture children so that they, as the future of all of us, right? They're the future of the world, that they have an opportunity, that they're educated, that they're healthy, that they're safe in their communities. And if all of those things can happen, the world would be much better for everyone, not just children. I feel like we have a sacred obligation to these children to do that. And I really hope that everyone can come together and prioritize that effort so that children have some hope of a better life.
Catherine Russell, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Tania. Appreciate it.